So one place I was working yesterday, and it's just like your mind gets so full of this information that I felt like there was no place in my heart and mind to even have this conversation we're having today. I feel great about it today. I feel like all freed up. So, um, but there's that Greek phrase in Ephesians, which gets translated. It's only in Ephesians. Paul 5 times uses this Greek phrase, and again used nowhere else, which is very telling. And it gets translated in the King James Bible um, as in heavenly places. In heavenly places. 5 times he says that in Ephesians. And the first place is that we have way King James says it, we have all spiritual blessings in heavenly places. Concordant translates it instead of in, says among, and among the celestials instead of in heavenly places. And and I think both ways that it gets translated there is in some ways is not quite adequate to express what's happening. And I've always known that, and we've ran articles in the BSN about this, but this will be my, to use the videos that you produce to really get a deep dive. Maybe I thought I had before, but getting deeper into that, and it's really tricky. And I'm finding out the grammatical nuances of it and the syntax and the way it's working. Because that word heavenly there or celestial is an adjective by nature, which means obviously that it's, there needs to be a noun associated with it, which there's not. And this does sometimes happen in language. And Bullinger calls that a figure of speech when you use an adjective as if it were a noun. And that's what's happening. And a part of what brings about the confusion of the passage and why someone would So the word in heavenly places is added by the King James because the translators realized that this heavenly needed a noun. And so it put things in there, and then the concordant, didn't supply a noun. And so what it supplied was, it replaced in by among, which I honestly have long thought was an error, and I'm becoming more convinced of it. So the whole idea of the King James is there's some things that are in heaven, and those are our spiritual blessings. And the whole idea behind the concordant way it translates it is that we have some spiritual blessings, and they are, and instead of things being the noun, the concordant without adding the noun is suggesting that it is the inhabitants of the heavens, celestial beings. And that's why it says among the celestial brackets beings, so that we have our inheritance. So the King James, the idea is that our blessings are in these things that are in the heavens, and the concordant is trying to convey that our blessings are among celestial beings. And both of them are very inadequate. And I'm just, I'm going to say, and I've made statements like this before. I think even in some recent videos. I don't know. Yeah, but anyway, is that our 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 spiritual every spiritual blessing we have isn't among the celestials. It's not among celestial beings. It's above them, not among them. We're not like the angels and so forth. For goodness sake, we're seated at the right hand of God in Jesus Christ. That's not among them. It's above them. Yeah, so eventually I'm going to, I'll be talking about this because we're going to look at this. One of the big things about going through Ephesians and Colossians is looking at the superlatives of Paul. I mean, abundantly above, all that we ask or think, far up above all heavens, is where Christ said it. I mean, he's just, the superlatives are, Concordant says transcendently transcendent. He can't seem to get enough superlatives in. And it's because everything's hyper. All the truths of God are on steroids in Ephesians and Colossians. And it is evidenced by his use of words. And so what this is this heavenly and this celestial is heaven. It's hyper heaven. It's in the hyper heavens is where our spiritual blessings are, which is tremendous contrast to Israel, who has all their blessings on the earth and in the earthly sphere, which would include the New Jerusalem that comes down to the earth. And that's where all their blessings are. And ours aren't just in the heavens, they're far above all of them in a hyper heaven. And we know exactly where that is because we're told that he, Christ, who is our head, ascended up far above all heavens at the right hand of God. This is God's place. And Christ shares that with the Father and somebody else. And I think it gets a little all lost, in most all translations, even the Concordant, because they assumed, they thought that the adjective there should be an adjective for the beings that currently live there. But we're clearly above them. He says that, that he gave him headship over all principalities and powers and mights and dominions and names that are named. Not among them, over them, So Jesus Christ is not one of the celestial beings. He's not one of the powers that are in the heavens. All back to sort of, Stephen's talk on the celestial realm. Christ didn't go there and become a part of that company. He sat down at the Father's right hand to have dominion over all that. And that's where we are. So